We're used to being on camera. Knowing that camera is putting me in a centrally searchable database, people don't like that, but they don't know, right?
It's not often for a company to make the news and stay in the news for something that has to do with privacy, but Flock has done that. Flock is one of the most infamous surveillance companies that has all these agreements with law enforcement, especially around the US, and they have made a pretty bad name for themselves, and they have made the news quite a bit for doing things they shouldn't be doing, from collecting data they're not supposed to collect, from just being plain creepy. So we have these counter movements now, things like DEFLOCK, and I wanted to ask them what they stand for, what started DEFLOCK, why Flock specifically is targeted, or if this is more about a broader movement against these kinds of companies. And we dive a lot more into what we can do to actually take action against all of this surveillance technology going on right now. Without further ado, let's cut over to it. All right, so today I have on Bob from DEFLOCK. Do you want to just tell me a little bit about yourself, your background, and what you're working on today?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. We're doing a whole bunch of stuff, a lot of which you're familiar with. My involvement with DFlock started about a year ago. My primary function here is that I'm the app developer. As I've continued to help out, that has grown a little bit to Discord mod, doing little interviews like this, answering emails. But we're a pretty small volunteer team. None of us get paid anything. It's all free time, post-tax dollars from our day jobs.
I feel like Flock made a lot of news during the Ring integration and the Super Bowl ad, and it really made headlines. So do you mind kind of expanding first for anybody who didn't catch that whole saga? What is Flock, just from a very basic kind of perspective? What happened there, and why is there so much controversy around this company?
So Flock Safety, Flock Surveillance, I prefer to call them. They're one of a number of vendors making what they like to call ALPRs, or automated license plate readers, which really is a bit of a misnomer. They do a whole lot more than just read license plates. In the case of Flock, they're using AI in a centralized backend to cloud-based backend to tag things like make, model, color, roof racks, bumper stickers, window tints, bike racks, all that kind of stuff. And they recently renamed it from a vehicle fingerprint to a vehicle signature, which I think just sounds a little better PR wise. I think somebody told them to do that. But they're building this database, and every time they see a vehicle, regardless of whether you're on any kind of a watch list or the car is stolen or anything like that, they're putting you in a database that then becomes searchable for, by default, 30 days, but it can be longer, without a warrant. So we've seen a lot of abuse already. A lot of the value proposition from Flock specifically, although they're not the only one doing this, is their ability to share between law enforcement agencies, including across state lines in many cases. So there are a couple of states that limit sharing of ALPR data outside of state, but they are in the minority. And I don't even want a statewide surveillance network that watches everybody all the time. Flock in particular have made themselves a bit of an easy target, and they've been in the news a lot lately, but they are far from the only game in town. They're maybe the most recognizable, and they're the fastest growing vendor of this type of surveillance right now. But they're not the only one, and it's not a new issue, and it's not even just ALPRs.
Yeah, that's kind of my next follow-up is that I've been doing this for a long time, and Flock isn't the first version, and it's not going to be the last. And so why do you think Flock specifically has gotten the most amount of, it seems like, press in the last decade?
It's a good question. I think, for a long time, mass surveillance and warrantless surveillance, the surveillance state, the growth of the surveillance state was sort of nebulous and out there. And it was on the TV when Edward Snowden showed up, and it was on page 284 of your Google Terms of Service. But it hasn't ever really been like looking over your shoulder 6 times on your way to work. Right. And there have been cameras, and people don't generally have an issue with a camera that records in case something happens. It's the constant pre-processing in a centralized way that makes this a really scary tool. Flock in particular, they're just really easily identifiable. They're uniquely dystopian looking cameras on a very unique black pole that you'll see at the entrance to your neighborhood. And unlike a Motorola ALPR that's on top of a police car, it makes you stop and pause and go, what is that? Where'd that come from? So it's not that people haven't cared about this topic. It's just that it's not felt quite as tangible and quite as close to home for most people until very recently.
Got it. And I know a lot of our audience, myself and you, are already on the same page about this kind of thing. But let's say someone's listening and they go, okay, what's wrong with pre-processing. I don't understand. If you're not doing anything wrong, there's really nothing to be concerned about. So what are kind of your real fundamental concerns that you like to share with people that actually get you worried about this technology?
Fundamentally, the reason this goes across the political spectrum is because everybody has their own fears of what the future could look like, and a lot of them include a government run amok that has passed unjust laws and is enforcing them universally with impunity. This is one of the tools that a government needs to do that. So whether you're worried about, ICE picking up people who may or may not be here illegally, whether you're worried about the ATF building a database of people who like to go to church on Sunday mornings, like, we're all afraid of being watched all the time when we're not doing anything wrong. There's a reason we have a Fourth Amendment here, and most of it boils down to human nature. Government is made up of people, and people make mistakes, and people do bad things. And giving any group of people too much ability to peer into other people's lives is just a dangerous thing to do.
So would you say, because something you mentioned earlier was the lack of warrants, and the reality is that police can obtain a lot of this information directly. So is really the real concern here that it's a private company that's essentially bypassing that normal Fourth Amendment and other kind of protections, or is there more going on here?
I would say there's more going on here. Third-party doctrine is what brings that about. And we just saw the Supreme Court make a couple of decisions recently that affected how that's going to work. And we have yet to see what the real-world implications of that will be. But generally, we think that's good news. I guess the point here is that you can't put that much data in the hands of a group of people without them having a reason to look at it. It's, already the number one reason that has been given for a search of the Flock system is the word investigation, right? That's not good enough. That is not reasonable, articulable suspicion of a crime. You have to explain why you're peering into somebody's life, right? Especially over a wide period of time and geographic area.
Got it. And so if someone's listening to this and they ask, okay, where is this happening? I haven't seen one of those black polls. I personally haven't actually, funny enough, even though I do this for a living, I haven't actually seen one firsthand,
Yep.
But I've probably been caught in them countless times. I'm just not looking for them actively. So where are these? Are they all around the country? Are they kind of centralized to just cities? Are they spread out? Can you kind of speak to the geographic reality here?
They're typically bought at the city level. You sometimes see them at the county level and occasionally at the state level. They also, you see them in private parking lots like Lowe's, Home Depot, Simon's Malls. And you see them at HOAs.
Placed in these different places, is it all being fed to the same data set, or is it being kind of compartmentalized between corporate and public?
There is from my understanding, a flag on an account that sets whether it is a public entity, law enforcement, or whether it's a private entity. And I'm told that there are safeguards in place that prevent public entities from sharing with private, right? But like in the case of Lowe's, for example, we know they have a form that law enforcement can fill out to request access. So those hook in really easily. You see a lot of sharing from private to public for sure, and from public to public. So yeah, the sharing is one of the things that really gets the hairs on the backs of people's necks standing up, is that there are people in other states who are searching you for things that might be legal in your state in some cases.
Got it. Are there any states where there is no flock at all, period?
I don't believe there are any states where there are none. As far as I'm aware, there are only privately owned, I don't want to say owned, Flock doesn't sell their hardware. You don't even lease the hardware from Flock. You purchase a subscription service from Flock, and they own and maintain the hardware. There are privately paid for Flock installations, I believe, in Alaska, but I don't think any public entities have Flock in Alaska. Now, I'm sure that there are other ALPR vendors up there doing much the same thing, right? There's Flock, there's Axon, there's Motorola, who owns Vigilant, there's Rekor, there's Genetec. There's a whole laundry list of companies that are doing this kind of thing.
Got it. And so why, are the companies and the people who are purchasing Flock, their incentive to me probably isn't to create a dragnet surveillance. That's not their ultimate goal in purchasing Flock. Can you speak to what it looks like on their end, why they're choosing to go with these providers, and why they're complicit in this maybe, or what your perspective on that as a whole?
Law enforcement is a difficult job, and I sympathize with the people who do that job. General warrants are an effective tool for law enforcement as well. The unfortunate truth is whether a tool is useful for law enforcement isn't the bar for whether it's allowed in this country. So while I understand that it is very helpful to be able to look into the past movements of somebody, you do still need a good reason to do that, right?
Right. What about private companies like Lowe's?
There's increasing cooperation between, public entities and private, especially on that scale, and that is concerning. It's a socio-political issue, and it's a little bit of crisis of democracy, the amount of sway that some of these corporations have in our politics. If I'm going onto Lowe's property, it's pretty hard to argue under today's law that they don't have the right to record me. I would argue that you're going a little bit farther than recording me when you then are putting together a history of every time I've been to any Lowe's location, every time I've driven through a parking lot, everything I've ever bought there, and then you're compiling and selling that data. Most people, I don't think, expect that kind of thing is going on. They have, again, a vague awareness of the fact that those kind of things do go on, but it's not quite as tangible, right, until you see it over your shoulder.
Right. You mentioned earlier there was a couple states that had limits on ALPR data. Do you mind expanding on that, what those states are and what those limits look like, and if you think they go far enough?
I don't have them all memorized. I know Illinois and California for sure do not allow sharing out of state. I want to say it's Delaware, New Hampshire. It's one of the little states out on the East Coast has really, really short, like 3-minute data retention period, which now, what counts as data retention? What counts as data? What counts as customer data? There's, all these questions, right? At the end of the day, you've still got an internet connected camera that's on the side of the road that it's really hard to know where that data is going, what's being done to it, how copies are being taken, blah, 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 blah. I don't think that the solution to this is going to be regulation or transparency. I think that the solution to this is to not build the infrastructure of control and mass surveillance in the United States. Personally, I don't think that there is a way to build such a system safely and put it into the hands of anybody.
Makes sense. Something I've seen in other areas as well. This is actually most seen by myself on these like people search removal sites, right? So you have an organization that says, hey, I can remove this data, but then we find out later that it's actually also a company that is a data broker themselves. So you have this company that's trying to sell B2B and say, yeah, we can buy data, we can do all these things. And then they try to also sell to consumers and say, oh, we really care about your privacy. So I consider that double dipping. I've seen a general pattern with companies like Flock where they pick and choose when they say something's, oh, this is our proprietary way of tracking people. And they say this to other companies and police, law enforcement to try to, hype themselves up and make it seem like they have some proprietary data that no one else can access. And then when you get regulators, you get people asking them questions, they go, we're not doing anything wrong. It's all public data. This is something anyone can do. Does Flock have access to something that is something no one else can do, or are they just kind of the biggest in the space right now? They're getting away with it. What does the tech look like behind the scenes is really what I'm getting at here.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's AI visual models. There's nothing particularly unique about this. You're tagging certain characteristics out of a photograph, and then you're doing, correlative analysis to find other matching data points. What Flock's really selling, they claim, is not the data itself. It's the capture, processing, storage, and access to the data. And whatever counts as the data supposedly belongs to the customer, and Flock doesn't sell it. Now, they also claim they have end-to-end encryption, which means one end is the camera and the other end is Flock, not you accessing it, right? It's encrypted from the camera to Flock, and then once Flock has it, it's decrypted, and then it's stored on encrypted storage that both Flock and Amazon have the keys to.
It's a funny use of the word end-to-end encryption in that context.
Yeah. It's what
not in the spirit of it.
Right. It's not in the spirit of it for sure. So, do they have access? Yes. And we've seen that happen both through, technical glitches, according to Flock, and through procedural failures and policy failures. We saw that down in Dunwoody, right? That a Flock person had access to the cameras in Dunwoody through a misconfiguration. Really, the way that their sharing works, it couldn't work any other way, right? You can't do just full end-to-end encryption the way that they're offering their product with all of the sharing from organization to organization. It just doesn't do that, right? That's not what end-to-end encryption means. You'd have to be managing a gigantic set of keys, and they don't. So it's really tough to say who's accessing what at any given time. And we've also seen that the audit logs that Flock produces are not infallible.
What is kind of like, I go to DEFLOCK'S website, right? And I'll start with that. Why don't you explain for people who haven't actually visited DEFLOCK? What are you guys doing on your website? What is the overall scope of how you're trying to tackle this problem?
Yeah, so DFlock has grown significantly from the original goal, which started by Will Freeman about a year and a half, almost 2 years ago. And the original goal, which is still on our website right now at the top, is an open source project mapping the locations of automated license plate readers. And DFlock could not have been more successful in that pursuit. As the topic has gotten more into the mainstream, we've been sort of a lightning rod for the topic, and we've had a lot of people asking us questions that have nothing to do really with mapping, such as this conversation here. So we are looking at expanding the scope of what our claimed mission is, but we do also have like FOIA resources and advice on how to talk to city council on our website and some other things, FAQs. So we're really becoming sort of a conversation place for people to come together and learn about this and rally behind a name and meet people in their local community. We've got well over 60 local groups that have popped up and that have gotten in touch with us and wanted to get an official DFlock local chapter that, go stand on the steps of City Hall, go talk to some people, go put a post on Facebook, go have a community town hall, file some FOIA requests, have a conversation with your representatives, put up signs, get something done. You have a lot more power in your local community than a lot of people think, and helping people to make that real has been really rewarding.
And what's not to question why it exists, of course, but what is the purpose of the map? Is it to kind of shock people into seeing just how widespread it is? Like, what have you actually seen as the real world impact of that map?
That is, I suppose, the primary purpose of it, is to see just visually like, oh, these are everywhere. Like I said, finally, there's a visible extent of the surveillance state that's looking over your shoulder in your neighborhood. But still, there's a lot of infrastructure on roads. We pass 100 little black pods on poles. Seeing a map of them all and realizing like, oh, it's not just something I see every once in a while. I only notice it every once in a while. I pass these things every single day, right? And just making that real to people and seeing one down at the corner by the store that you visit, right? And going, holy shit, I never noticed that there.
Yeah. Have you seen an uptick in you said you started a year and a half ago, the map, the DFlock organization. What's been the overall expansion of that in the last year and a half? Is it exponentially growing? Is it staying stagnant? Can you kind of speak to this?
Do you mean the people looking at the map, or do you mean the map data?
Mostly the map data, but I would also like to know the people looking at the map.
So actually, I don't know if you have ability to screen share, and I guess people who are on podcasts won't be able to see anyway, but if you go to our website, on the maps page, there is a timeline view. And now this is mapping not just when they were installed, but when they were reported. So to some extent, there's an influencing factor of how many people were paying attention and putting these on the map. Everything on DFlock is community sourced and submitted through OpenStreetMap. For people who aren't familiar, they're basically like Wikipedia for maps. And anybody can go on and you can map sidewalks, fire hydrants, and park benches, and water fountains, and all kinds of things. They're a really excellent community and a fantastic project. So we chose to use them as the backend for DFlock, and that's basically where all that comes from. So you'll see on the timeline that it really was like 2021, 2, 3, that it was pretty flat. And then in 2023, 4, 5, it started going really crazy because people started noticing and being like, I'm going to help out and get involved with DFlock and start putting these on the map. Wow.
Has Flock had any kind of commentary about the DFlock project? I assume they're not fans of people knowing the exact locations of all of them.
They've had a few choice words. About a year ago, their CEO called us terrorists, which was interesting. He very recently, he didn't apologize. He said he was sorry he said it, which, losing will make you sorry. So we're hopeful that that's a good sign for us. And we believe that it is. We've seen, like I said, a bunch of local groups popping up, a bunch of contracts getting canceled, a bunch of attention being paid to this issue. And it's just been really, really encouraging the past 6 months or so.
Yeah, and I'm sure every example of this happening is a bit different, but I know LAPD in the last week, they decided not to renew with Flock. The thing is, we as the public never see like, oh, is that because there was so much public pressure? Is it because they just didn't see the value in it? Do you ever get more insight, or do you guys have maybe a pattern over time over why people choose not to renew with Flock and the priorities there?
Occasionally, you do get insight into that. Comments are made by public representatives. In a lot of cases, it is because of the pushback. It's unpopular enough that it can't be done for logistical reasons. You'll get voted out. In LA, I don't know exactly the reasons. I do know that LA has other vendors that are still providing LPR, and I believe they're actually growing their contract with Axon commensurate with the cancellation of the Flock contract. So that's disappointing to see. Like I said, there's a whole lot of vendors that are doing this sort of thing, and getting people educated on what they all look like and what to be looking for and how to be aware when they show up in your community is a never-ending task.
So when you encourage people to get involved locally, and I want to ask a bit more about this and kind of compile the real actionable stuff soon here, but just to dive a bit deeper on one specific thing, are you communicating and asking people to communicate to DFLOCK or to DE-ALPR? Because it doesn't seem like a success to me if LA just starts giving money to another ALPR company that's doing the same exact thing. So what's this messaging look like?
That's right. DFLOCK originally was pointed at flock safety. I envision a future where DFLOCK means stop treating us like a flock of sheep, right? And it applies to whatever, whether that's, the NSA that's reading all your emails and taking your call logs, or whether that's an LPR vendor at the end of your street. Stop keeping such close tabs on people who aren't suspected of any wrongdoing. Leave us alone. Get out of my life.
Got it. Where do you normally have people start? If someone sees your map for the first time, they probably experience what you probably want them to experience and feel, which is, oh my gosh, that looks scary. Don't like this. Where do you normally, if you're sitting down with them and they're in front of you, start this conversation of what they can do?
So I said earlier, you have a lot more power in local government than you might realize. Get together with some local folks, start a conversation, start a group, put up signs, hand out flyers, get together at town hall, speak at a public meeting, email your representatives, buy them a beer. I mean, you can do these things, right? Get involved. There is power in numbers. Having 2 people reach out and send an email is a lot different than having 85 people show up for a town council meeting where they were talking about budget, right? They don't expect that to happen. And when it does, it makes somebody question why. You have to pay attention to that kind of thing. It's an outlier, right?
Got it. And what about any other things that people can get involved? Like if somebody's already getting involved locally, or let's say they don't have the time. Let's say they have tons of kids at home, they're a single parent. What can they still do if they want to still contribute somehow?
You know what? The biggest thing right now is still education. We've gotten a lot of attention recently, and it's been very encouraging, but still a lot of people just do not know what's going on or how pervasive and how intrusive this stuff is getting and the true capabilities of these. We're used to being on camera, right? Knowing that camera is not just recording me, that camera is tagging me and putting me in a centrally searchable database, potentially nationwide. People don't like that, but they don't know, right? So if all you can do is post on Facebook, talk to somebody at your book club, do that. It's very much, you never know who you're talking to, right?
Right. To kind of start closing this out, if someone wants to hear a little bit more about why you got into this, like it sounds like you have your own full-time job. So why do you dedicate time on the side to this? What's the personal kind of reason here?
Yeah, I do have a full-time job, and this DEFLOCK stuff has been pretty consuming. I grew up in, I guess, what you'd call a legacy conservative home where I was taught the 9 scariest words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. I was listening to people decry cradle to grave policy. I learned about, the Social Security Act was meant to make us all dependent on the government and all of these things. And a couple of those things I ended up taking with me, and a healthy distrust for people who claim to have your best interests in mind. That's one of the big ones, right? So like I said earlier, regardless of what your concerns are about the future, we all have things in common that we can agree on. And in my experience, this is one of those things. People don't like just being spied on and having their lives cataloged and made searchable without good reason.
And you mentioned earlier that this seems to be pretty bipartisan. Is that what you guys have seen in pretty much most states and situations and over at DFLOCK as well?
Yeah, massively so. Tucker Carlson was talking about us. Alex Jones was talking about us. The right really, I think, just didn't catch on quite as quickly. And part of that might be because of who's in office right now, that the left feels more threatened at the moment, so they're paying closer attention. Don't know why. And you know what? I don't care. Anybody that doesn't want this in their neighborhoods, I am perfectly happy to shake hands and agree on that. And let's go talk to our city council. Let's go email our representatives. Let's go make our voices heard and get this done. We can argue about other stuff later. And it's been great to see that sentiment in a whole bunch of people. all over the place. I mean, on Reddit and Facebook, where you don't expect people to be shaking hands about that kind of thing. It's been great to see people come together and say, yeah, no, I'm a libertarian. I'm a MAGA. I'm, my hair is blue, right? I live in California. And we're all like, hey, let's come together and let's get this done.
Not many things do that today. Yeah, almost
Very,
everything
very
there has
few.
to be a side. So you've really stumbled on something magical there in this
Yep.
day and age.
I am glad to see that so many people do still care. I mean, it for a long time this has been building, right? And people haven't noticed. It's been on page 283, and it's been great to see that people are finally coming together and noticing this en masse and doing something about it.
That's great. So if someone's listening, they like you guys, they want to check it out, where do you normally send them? Is there a community they can join? How can they follow what you guys are working on?
Yeah, definitely. Go on noalprs.com, which is our upcoming week of action, just under a month from now. Go on deflock.org, look at the local groups. You can send us an email if you have some folks together that you want to have, DEFLOCK City. Send us an email. We'll get you listed and we'll get some folks coming your way. But yeah, get in contact, join the Discord. We do have a donate link on the website. Nothing is expected. Like I said, none of us make any money. That's just the way it is. We're here because we want to change something about the future that we're going to all live in.
If you had to shout out one city that's done an incredible amount of work and has made huge progress, who would you shout out?
Oh boy, there are so many cities that, the amount of work that people do in a city is not really commensurate with the results. Sometimes all it takes is that you have to go have a conversation with the right folks and things change. And other times you need a huge citizen movement and push. And I've even seen places where there were recall elections to get somebody out of office to tip a vote. So I wouldn't point anybody out as saying these people did the best job. I will say there have been a couple of cities that have actually banned the use of these kind of technologies, which has been super great to see.
Which
that
ones
they
do
actually,
those?
I want to say Ypsilanti, Michigan is one of them. We have them listed on deflock.org/council. There is a list of wins. Yeah, the Ypsilanti City Council unanimously banned the use of ALPRs within city limits. Passed 5-0.
That's great.
Yep. So, and we've seen people talking on the state and national level as well about this. I think there was a couple of months ago, Thomas Massey and Lauren Boebert, strange bedfellows, putting out their Surveillance Accountability Act. It's probably not going anywhere, but it's great to see that there are people on the national stage who are paying attention to this. There are enough people making noise and upset about this that it's garnering attention at that level. And if we can keep the heat on and if we can keep educating people, I think we can make our voices loud enough that we see real change.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing everything and for the work that I know you're doing every day, especially with balancing everything else that I'm sure you're juggling. So it's much appreciated, and it's been great to have you on and learn more about it.
It's been great talking. Anytime.
Yeah, thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Make sure to get involved if you can. This is still an ongoing fight, and I want to thank Bob from DEFLOCK for really expanding on all of these issues, covering what you guys can do about it, why he personally got invested in this. If you like these kind of discussions, of course, subscribe to Techlore Talks, give it a rating, like it, share it around with friends and family. But if you want to keep up to date with the latest threats and what's going on, make sure to follow Surveillance Report. That's where I pretty much send out a weekly newsletter for all of you to make it super easy and simple to keep up with what's going on. This stuff changes literally all the time. And so if you want to stay in the loop, that's the best way to do it. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for taking your digital safety a little bit more seriously. And I will see you next time on Techlore.